Yeah, you staged it! You staged it! Don't you try! You staged it!
Keir Starmer thought he had the full support of the British public. But as protests erupt across the nation, from pensioners to students to working-class families, it's clear that something has gone terribly wrong for the Labour leader. The very people who once backed him are now taking to the streets in unprecedented numbers, and the government is struggling to keep control. With growing pressure from all sides, whispers of Starmer's potential resignation are beginning to circulate in Westminster. So how did we get here? And is this the beginning of a political reckoning that could change Britain forever?
Why are you targeting the elderly to save money?
We have found a £22 billion black hole in the economy, and we've got to fix it. What we're not going to do is pretend it isn't there or paper over it. That's what the last government did, and it made it worse. That means we've got to make tough choices. I don't want to cut the winter fuel allowance. I don't think anybody government wants to do that, but we've got to fix the foundations of our economy. And that's what this is all about, making sure that we fix the foundations.
For years, pensioners in Britain have lived through economic challenges, but recent government policies have pushed them beyond their limits. The biggest blow? The decision to cut winter fuel payments, a move that directly affects over 10 million pensioners. This payment was a crucial lifeline for many elderly citizens, especially as energy costs continue to soar. For some, it meant the difference between heating their homes and enduring freezing temperatures during winter. The outrage has been immense, leading to protests in places like Durham, Manchester, and even traditionally quiet rural areas.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a suspicion as well, because a lot of people, older people vote Tory, you're getting punished for it. That's another view that's growing.
Yeah, well, I tell you, all Labour pensioners are absolutely furious and feel betrayed. I mean, it is as strong as that. We voted Labour and we never thought you would do this to us. I've heard it so often.
Yeah.
And I know so many people who've heard it so often. I've heard, it's just... It's sometimes in politics, you wonder...
The betrayal cuts deep, especially for pensioners who have supported Labour for decades. Many of these individuals remember a time when Labour stood firmly for the working class, providing social protections and prioritising the needs of the vulnerable. Now they feel abandoned by a party that once claimed to be their champion.
Social media. We've also got a speaker here today called Chris, and she's representing...
It's fabulous that we're here today. But this is, I've got no prepared speeches.
Tax the rich and make them pay!
Yes, Starmer!
What's even more remarkable is how these protests are being organised. Community groups and social media platforms have played a crucial role, allowing pensioners to mobilise at a scale never seen before. Videos of elderly protesters braving the cold, marching with handmade signs and chanting slogans against Starmer's government have gone viral, igniting further public support.
Tuition fees is a huge debt for young people that they carry with them for a very long time. And that's why we rightly committed at last election to get rid of tuition fees.
What about university tuition fees then? Will you remain committed to scrapping them in your first term?
Pledges, Andrew. So the answer to these questions is yes.
So university tuition fees being scrapped will be in a Starmer manifesto?
Yes, that's why it's
the next election. Okay.
Me going to university as the first in my family was an incredible thing for my family because it was part of that ordinary hope of working class families.
But it's not just pensioners who are furious. The discontent has spread to Britain's younger generation, particularly students. Once a core voting bloc for Labour, students are now turning against Starmer due to his government's failure to lower tuition fees, despite earlier promises to do so. Instead of relief, many are facing the possibility of increased fees, pushing higher education further out of reach for working class families.
So starting today, I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Yeah. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027.
The backlash has been swift and widespread. Protests have erupted across major universities, with students from diverse backgrounds coming together to demand change. Unlike past demonstrations, this movement isn't limited to one university or political ideology. It has become a nationwide call for accountability. Social media has amplified the movement, with students using platforms like TikTok, Instagram and Twitter to organise sit-ins, mass walkouts and online petitions. Hashtags calling for Starmer's resignation are trending, further fueling the movement's momentum. The frustration goes beyond tuition fees. Many students are struggling with the cost of living, skyrocketing rent, and inflation that makes even basic necessities a financial burden. Starmer's government, which once promised to be an ally, now seems indifferent to their struggles. While pensioners and students are at the forefront, the working class, Labour's historical backbone, is also rising up. Industrial regions once considered Labour strongholds are now hotbeds of unrest. Workers are demanding job security, fair wages, and protection from the economic instability that government policies have exacerbated.
Get Starmer out! Get him out! Get him out!
Many former Labour supporters are now leading protests against the very party they once championed. Factory workers, truck drivers and service industry employees are speaking out against policies that they believe have ignored their needs in favour of corporate interest. Even more striking is the involvement of families. Entire households are joining protests, bringing along their children to demonstrate the impact these policies have had on their future. The sight of multi-generational families standing side by side, demanding accountability, is a powerful image that has left the government scrambling for a response. Perhaps the most unexpected development is the growing reluctance among police officers to enforce government orders against peaceful protesters.
Why the fuck you got him in your roof for this, son? Get the fuck off. Stay there.
Traditionally, law enforcement has been used to maintain public order during protests. However, reports indicate that many officers are sympathising with demonstrators, especially pensioners and students. Some officers have reportedly refused to crack down on protests, while others have expressed frustration with being forced to act against people they personally support.
Not every nation will feel able to contribute, but that can't mean that we sit back. Instead, those willing will intensify planning now with real urgency. The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air. Together with others, Europe must do the heavy lifting.
This internal division is a nightmare scenario for the government. Without the full backing of law enforcement, maintaining control over an uprising of this scale becomes increasingly difficult. If police officers begin openly siding with protesters, Starmer's administration could find itself in an unprecedented crisis.
Was made particularly on protecting the state pension through the triple lock, even taking into account the decision she's taken on winter fuel allowance. Pensioners will still be better off this winter than they were last winter, and will be better off next winter further still. And of course, one of the reasons that gives me confidence to stand by that assertion is
a nightmare scenario for the government. Without the full backing of law enforcement, maintaining control over an uprising of this scale becomes increasingly difficult. The protests have caught Starmer's government off guard, triggering a series of emergency cabinet meetings. Ministers are reportedly in a state of panic, unsure of how to contain the growing unrest.
Be in no doubt, those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow. I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether direct...
Starmer has attempted to make policy reversals to regain public trust, but these last-minute changes have been met with scepticism. Many see them as desperate attempts to salvage a crumbling reputation rather than genuine efforts to fix the issues at hand.
No harm. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was in South Lochaber at the weekend speaking to pensioners who still cannot understand why the Prime Minister chose to take away their winter fuel payment.
Shame.
And one of them remembered from just 2 years ago the then leader of the opposition saying, "Looking ahead to winter is frightening. I've met pensioners who have no idea how they'll heat their home." And she asked me to ask you, Prime Minister.
Even within the government, cracks are beginning to show. Advisers and officials who once stood by Starmer are now distancing themselves from decisions that have fueled public outrage. Some MPs have even begun questioning whether Starmer is the right leader for Labour moving forward. Behind closed doors, there are growing whispers of potential leadership challenges. If the protests continue to gain momentum, it's entirely possible that Starmer could be forced to step down before Christmas. What's happening in Britain isn't just a series of isolated protests. It's a national uprising. For the first time in generations, ordinary Britons from all walks of life are uniting against their government. The sight of pensioners and students marching together, backed by working-class families and even law enforcement, is a powerful reminder that political loyalty isn't guaranteed.
What I want people to do is to look at the Labour Party and see a party that understands their worries, that takes them seriously and is prepared to put practical plans on the table. People don't want a revolution. They do want to know, how am I going to pay my energy bill, which has just gone up today by hundreds of pounds? We're putting a practical plan on the table that says, for those that need it most, you ask oil and gas companies who have made more profit than they were expecting.
This movement isn't just about Keir Starmer. It's about a system that many feel has failed them. Whether or not Starmer resigns, one thing is clear: the British people have found their voice and they're not backing down. The question now is, what happens next? Will these protests force real change, or will the government find a way to suppress the movement? And if Starmer steps down, who will take his place?
Get Starmer out! Get him out! Get him out!
The backlash has been swift and widespread. Protests have erupted across major universities, with students from diverse backgrounds coming together to demand change. Unlike past demonstrations, this movement isn't limited to one university or political ideology. It has become a nationwide call for accountability. Social media has amplified the movement, with students using platforms like TikTok, Instagram and Twitter to organise sit-ins, mass walkouts and online petitions. Hashtags calling for Starmer's resignation are trending, further fueling the movement's momentum. The frustration goes beyond tuition fees. Many students are struggling with the cost of living, skyrocketing rent, and inflation that makes even basic necessities a financial burden. Starmer's government, which once promised to be an ally, now seems indifferent to their struggles. While pensioners and students are at the forefront, the working class, Labour's historical backbone, is also rising up. Industrial regions, once considered Labour strongholds, are now hotbeds of unrest. Workers are demanding job security, fair wages and protection from the economic instability that government policies have exacerbated. Even within the government, cracks are beginning to show. Advisers and officials who once stood by Starmer are now distancing themselves from decisions that have fueled public outrage. Some MPs have even begun questioning whether Starmer is the right leader for Labour moving forward. Behind closed doors, there are growing whispers of potential leadership challenges. If the protests continue to gain momentum, it's entirely possible that Starmer could be forced to step down before Christmas. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Britain is on the verge of a major political shift? And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the biggest uprisings in recent history, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more updates, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on breaking news.